just onside, and as you can see, I'm back. Baj was here on, I think it was Thursday. We were supposed to be a threesome, but it's just not going to happen. Or is it? It probably might happen on Friday. But glad to be back. I had a family wedding over the weekend. I was in the smoke, so my old stomping ground. Quite good fun, apart from on Friday, where I was preoccupied with the transfer saga of Sinistera, which sort of ruined the wedding a little bit because I was preoccupied with just looking at my phone. But all good. I'm back. Glad to see you, Oris. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Yeah, weekend was nice. I was celebrating Archie Gray's call up to the England under-19 squad, but I hear he won't be travelling due to some fitness concerns. Do you want to enlighten our viewers, Ayub, on your thoughts about Archie Gray? Leeds' Archie Gray.
Yes, I mean I've had some ribbing from some people on this subject matter, because I actually I'm a massive fan of Archie Gray. Obviously, most of the viewers will have no idea who Archie Gray is. He's got a good footballing pedigree. Mark my words, this guy will be a sensation if he stays injury-free. I did get carried away. I did say he's better than Declan Rice. He's 17. He's played virtually every single game thus far, but he's sensational. So what I would say, viewers, is have a little look on YouTube about Archie Gray.
Don't.
He's one for the future.
Well, you say you got a little carried away. Let me quote you. He's a much more accomplished player than Rice, a generational player, and will go on to become one of the finest midfielders in the world. No, I thought you were quite mild, you, to be fair. But,
I was back in London, so I might have been smoking something quite savoury.
Let's leave that there.
Yes, right. Okay, then. So glad to be back. Good weekend of football. We said there was a game that stood out, and it was Arsenal versus Manchester United, and it sort of lived up to the billing, or certainly the end did. As usual, we love football, and I suppose what we love about football is that there's drama, excitement, and lots of controversy. And this game had plenty of controversy. Let's just go straight to the game. OS, what was your take on that? Because it was, my goodness me, that was a dramatic ending.
It was indeed back-to-back Sundays, Ayub, with dramatic finishes. You'll remember last weekend, Newcastle, Liverpool, which we thought was the result of the season, and probably still is. And again, late drama in this game. Firstly, I mean, on the game itself, Arsenal-Manchester United historically is always a great game, whether it's at the Emirates or Highbury of old, or at Old Trafford. The two teams, there's a little bit of needle because of the historical rivalry, and now they're probably both in a similar boat, although Arsenal, you would argue, are further ahead than Manchester United, generally speaking. But they're in the same boat in terms of not had, not at their absolute best in terms of their legacy and what have you, and chasing a monster in Manchester City in terms of Premier League title honours and what have you. I thought it was, to your point, I think a game filled with tension, filled with pressure. We discussed it, about how a defeat for either team would send that team into the interval, into the international break with a lot of questions. And that's how it's happened. And that's what's transpired in the media, I would say, when you read some of the articles and kind of the reaction today. I thought on the whole, it was a game that could have gone in many different directions. I think Arsenal could have lost. They could have drawn. In the end, they've won the game. I think it was a game tightly contested and a game of fine margins. I know you're a big fan of that famous phrase coined by Ian Smith in the cricket, but it really was. It's just, these are the fine margins that we work with at high level sport. And if Gabriel isn't smart in terms of the way he positions and contorts his body, he's played Garnacho off by centimeters, really, in terms of just positioning body just correctly. And then a few minutes later, obviously Arsenal go up the other end, force a corner and get a goal by that game-defining midfielder that you're so fond of, Declan Rice.
I knew you were going to come on to this subject.
No, but all jokes aside, I mean, it was a fantastic game. I mean, these games are always watchable. I mean, there was some interesting strategies and tactics at play. Arsenal allowing Manchester United having the ball a fair bit. I think Onana ended up with more touches than Antony. And Manchester United got the early goal, the first foray really into the Arsenal box. box. Great finish by Marcus Rashford. Some question marks about the goalkeeper, but I think he's manipulated that situation with White and Saliba very well. Great finish. I thought Arsenal, again, instant response. You'd be disappointed if you were a Manchester United fan. You're thinking, right, perfect, sit in. Plenty of opportunities on the counter-attack for United. But Arsenal created that goal. I just want to quickly just talk about this goal, if I may, Ayub. That's the goal that Arsenal scored a lot of last season. And what I mean by that is the centre-backs having the ball, teams unsure whether to press or how to press, players sitting in pockets between the lines, and that ball from Gabriel into Martinelli is what sets it off. And I think if you watch the highlights again, you'll see the reaction of Anthony on the left side. He's questioning whether he has to press Gabriel or whether he has to track Zinchenko. And as soon as that ball's played, zipped 20-25 yards into Martinelli's feet, he throws his hands up in the air to say, well, that's the kind of pass that you've got to stop. So those are the issues an Arsenal team forces when they're in sync in terms of those moves that they create consistently last season. And then thereafterwards, Manchester United are kind of facing their own goal. It's quick pass, 1-2, lovely ball on the edge of the box, and Odegaard then coming in and scoring those similar goals that you saw last year against Chelsea at home as well, outside the box. And it was a fantastic finish. I mean, thereafterwards, a lot of incidents, a lot of controversy that we'll get into but in the end, I think Arsenal may well have earned themselves some luck, a little bit of luck. And the reason I say that is because I feel over the course of the game, it felt as though Arsenal, in a sense, to a large extent, were going to be the ones coming on strong and trying to force a victory. They did it last year at the Emirates. And what I mean by that is not so much that Arsenal went for it a bit more than Manchester United. No, it's just that Arsenal, I think, saw a draw as maybe not the best result, and hence it's in their DNA to go for the win. And sometimes when that's the case, you get the bounce of the ball, you get a little bit of luck, whereas I think Manchester United were happy to kind of see if they could manipulate a result on the counter-attack. That's what I felt. If you look at all the underlying stats, for the most part, Arsenal were superior in terms of expected goals, in terms of how many touches and passes they had in the final third, and etc., how many forward passes they had. So all the various different kind of second-level statistics that you look at, Arsenal were superior. That's not to say Manchester United didn't compete well, but as Gary Neville spoke about and Roy Keane spoke about in reaction, you can't just depress the ambition at Manchester United Football Club. They want to be challenging for Premier League titles, and that was a performance that you felt was, yes, good enough to maybe win the game on the counter, and it would have been a clinical away performance, you would say, and came very close to achieving that outcome. But when you're perhaps not the team pressing for the win, going for the win, playing within the margins of victory, defeat, so to speak, sometimes you find yourself on the wrong side of that equation. So an incredible game. I think we'll obviously speak about Declan Rice, so I'll let you articulate on that particular point, and we'll get into the controversial incidents. But on the whole, I felt Arsenal just edged it. A score draw would have been a fine result as well. I think that not either party could have complained because both teams could have lost. But in the end, the game is about those moments. And Declan Rice obviously has produced one. And then obviously Gabriel Jesus finished it on the counter-attack. So Arsenal will go into the international break fairly pleased. They've not hit top form clearly. Their performance still is not that of a title challenging team for me. Far from it. But I think Manchester United also have some question marks to answer. And a game at home to Brighton, a game they lost last season, beckons in game week 5 after the international break. If that doesn't go well, I could imagine the kind of the noise around Old Trafford getting more and more loud, I would say.
Again, excellently summarised. And I think you're right. I think if there was any team that perhaps deserved to win, it was the Arsenal. So I think in terms of results, perhaps it's a fair result because they were slightly the better side. Some lovely football. I think the first goal, Odegaard's goal, I think it was lovely. I think it's the movement. It's the difference. I mean, obviously now as a Leeds supporter, I'm watching a lot of Championship football, and you can tell the difference between the quality, the world-class quality, and I suppose lesser quality, because it was just wonderful. The weight of pass, the passing, the movement, Odegaard first touch. He doesn't need to settle. He just runs on clinical finish. And we've been talking about this about Rashford, that his preferred position is on the left-hand side. And we saw exactly the reason why. Wonderful ball by Eriksen, superb ball, excellent finish. And also, I mean, the game was over by then, but Gabriel Jesus, absolutely magnificent. I mean, it just is pure quality. He's running at quite a pace, but suddenly stops. Defender slides in, puts it across, great finish. I mean, by that stage, obviously, United were pouring forward, so it made it easier, but still clinical finish. So I think a fair result. I mean, I was actually, I didn't watch the early part of the game. I was in at a wedding in Bolton, but I did come home, and albeit there was I was watching it on my phone, but there was about 3 or 4 of us watching, and there was a young fella who was a mad keen Manchester United supporter, really mad keen. So it's 1-1. 2-1 for Manchester United. He's delighted. He's got a journey back to London. So he's actually said it will be a wonderful journey back. But my goodness me, within no time at all. Obviously, that's chalked off. 2-1, 3-1. Not sure exactly how his journey was, but it just shows the emotion of this game, that from
Absolutely.
high to low in no time at all. So a good game in terms of, I suppose, the drama and the controversy. Talking about controversy, again, you go through the incidents, because there's lots of maybe supporting arguments, maybe against the arguments as well, in terms of some of the decisions that have been made. But you go through it from the what incidents you want to talk about. Go on, you lead the way with.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there were a number of incidents, Ayub, in the game, and I think it would be wrong for us not to kind of go through the incidents. The main reason being is that Erik ten Hag was asked about that in his post-game comments by Dave Jones of Sky Sports, and obviously Theo Walcott, Roy Keane, and Micah Richards were there at the same time. And his very first comment from the question was about the wrong decisions. Now, I'm not going to be too critical about Erik ten Hag, because I've long been a believer that in the end, post-game comments by managers, especially where you've lost a tough game, I'm going to give them a pass, ultimately, irrespective of what they say. It's a little different when Jose Mourinho's in the press conference afterwards telling reporters how many Premier League titles he's won or what have you. That's a little different. But I think post-match comments immediately with reporters and kind of TV networks, I guess, is a bit of a challenge. Look, he alluded to those, and let's just quickly go through them very quickly. I think for me, let's go through some of the, in my opinion, the less controversial ones. There was some talk about during the goal for Declan Rice in the 96th minute, I think it was, that there was a foul by Gabriel on Evans because Gabriel was shielding the ball, allowing it to go to the far post. I did not see that as a foul. Main reason being, I mean, Dermot Gallagher today commented on Ref Watch that he felt it could have gone the other way. I don't see that either in terms of a penalty. I just see that being, we see that a fair bit now, blocking off at corners now. And unless it's absolutely obvious that it's a clear block and you're impeding a pathway, I think the defender's just got to find a way. You're seeing more and more of that. And I just think it's soft. Remember, it's still got to be a high bar to start disallowing goals just like that, just because you've got defenders throwing themselves on the floor. I mean, in the end, he's kind of thrown Gabriel on the floor, which is fine. I think he was trying to get to the ball, Evans. But for me, it's neither here nor there. If you're going to start choking off goals for ticky-tacky stuff, you're going to get a lot more nil-nil games. So for me, that wasn't a foul. How did you see that?
I disagree with you on that one. I thought Gabriel's intention was to block. And in the end, you're right. It was Evans who virtually throws Gabriel onto the floor, but that's because he was being impeded. Having played the game, watched the game, to me that is a player intentionally trying to block a defender because he's aware that there's a player behind who's going to have a good opportunity if he does what he was doing. So I think, in my mind, I think that was a bad decision. I agree with Ten Hag. I think that was a free kick. I think it was quite an obvious one as well. I don't think it was one where you say, well, it could go either way. I know obviously some people might say that, but to me that was a clear. The objective of Gabriel was to block. There was a little bit of manhandling, and it had the desired effect because the ball sort of popped over to Rice. He had lots of time. And then it was even. I think it deflected off Johnny Evans as well. Correct. It? So it did. I think that was harsh. That was really, really harsh. And I think, I mean, it's something that we've talked about before. I mean, the caliber of officiating. I think it's poor, and this game again demonstrated it is poor.
Where I agree with you is that Gabriel did intend to block. I don't have any disagreements with you on that particular front. It's clearly
Unfairly. He
it
blocked unfairly. Let me
let,
slip that in as well.
no, that's fine. I mean, we disagree, but what I'm trying to say is that if you start disallowing goals like that, then what you're going to get is defenders manipulating the situation and directly or intentionally running into opposition players. Say, "Oh, he's blocked me off." Now, do I think Gabriel was blocking him off? I do. Do I think Johnny Evans? Do I want my defender to be stronger or other defenders in the vicinity? Because remember, they left Declan Rice unmarked. I'm not saying Manchester United should be punished for that. If it's an unfair goal, it's an unfair goal. But I want my defenders being stronger to get out there. And again, you're going to see defenders start throwing themselves on the floor. And we've seen that a fair bit where referees just blow the whistle if they see some goalkeeper on the floor, a defender on the floor. In my opinion, I just don't want to see goals disallowed for stuff like that. I just think my defender's got to be a bit stronger. And I know if the shoe was on the other foot and that was Mustafi, a centre-back of Arsenal or whoever we had in our good old days, that would be the rhetoric. You just got to be stronger and get out there, in my opinion. But we agree to disagree.
Right. Well, I'd love to hear the viewers' take. I mean, if you're neutral, perhaps it's best if it's neutral, because I suppose if you're Arsenal, you've got an Arsenal bias. If you're Manchester United, you've got a Manchester United bias. So please drop a comment. What do you think? Do you think it was a foul, or do you think it wasn't a foul? Do you think agree with Ois that Evans should have been stronger? He was strong at the end when he pulled him down, but he was too late. So that was one of maybe 2 or 3 incidents. Yeah. Go on, next one.
Just very quickly. So I'm going to take Hojlund's penalty incident, who, by the way, looked really good when he came on. Yes. He looks like he's up for the fight. He finally looks like a striker that United have been craving for in terms of a presence, happy to be in the battle, not shying away from challenges, but also quick, so you can run in behind. I think time will tell, but I really, really like the look of him, and it was his flick that set up the potential assist for Garnacho's goal, which probably would have been a winning goal at that time, with Casemiro then playing him through. But lovely. I mean, it's what you want in a striker. You know, he went toe to toe with Gabriel, and he got inside in the box, isolated Gabriel, then cut inside onto his left foot. You can imagine Gabriel doesn't have that much tape on him. You would imagine. I mean, they have research on him. Obviously, he does. He was always going to play some part of the game, but he's not a player. He's obviously his first appearance in the Premier League, so he cuts in on his favoured left foot, and Gabriel, obviously, the allegation is ultimately is that Gabriel's impeded him. Again, my opinion, I have a high bar for a penalty. Just myself, because again, you're then going to start giving penalties willy-nilly and you'll have attackers manipulating the situation. I don't see that as a penalty. Do I think Gabriel was slightly, let's say, risky in terms of the fact that he didn't travel with the ball? Yes. But if you look at it closely, yes, does Gabriel end up hooking him with his left arm? Yes. But does Hojlund also initiate contact to try and grab Gabriel's arm? Yes. So for me, it's a little bit of hand fighting that you're going to get with strikers and defenders. If Gabriel, I think, went into him a little bit more laterally, or sideways, should I say, I think he was potentially risking a penalty. For me, not quite enough to meet that bar for a penalty. Your thoughts?
Disagree again. I think that was a penalty. I won't go as far as saying it's a stonewall penalty, but it was a penalty. I think if it's given against my team, I may not be happy, but I have to accept it. And that's the way that I looked at it. I think he's not gone to ground looking for a penalty. He's gone to ground because he's been forced to the ground. And that's what I always look at. I mean, obviously, we'll talk about Havertz, how easily some players go to ground. This was a guy who wasn't, or who didn't want to go to ground. He had no alternative because he was put in a situation by a challenge that made him go to ground. That was a penalty. For me, it was a penalty. 9 times out of 10, that should be given. So I was surprised that it wasn't given or considered. So that's another piece of bad luck for Manchester United.
In your opinion. So that's two. That's that's 2 for 2 on disagreements, but that's fine. I mean, Garnacho goal. Again, Erik ten Hag was of the opinion that it was onside. Now, look, forget the characters involved. Forget it was Man United. Forget it was Arsenal. You know my views on offside. Generally speaking, I'm one of those who believes that if it's relatively close, forget the lines. If it's very close or within a certain margin of tolerance, this is what I would aspire to have. This is what I would like to have. If it's within a certain margin of tolerance, I'd like the benefit of the doubt to be given to the attacker. I've shared that view with you before. Because the way I see it is, it's very difficult to tell exactly when Casemiro releases the ball. That's the first thing. There's an assumption that that's the moment when Casemiro releases the ball. So they have to freeze frame it at the point when the ball leaves Casemiro's foot. And for me, although it was a fantastic piece of defending by Gabriel in the end, you would argue, because he's stopped his run, turned around and slightly leaning backwards, if I can say, or the other way, he's played Garnacho just off. Now, I have to trust the lines because that's all I have to go off. I can't prove otherwise. It looks like from where the lines were drawn that he's marginally off. But then again, I question, are the lines drawn in the correct part? For example, the furthest part of Gabriel's head, the furthest part of Garnacho's shoulder, whatever. And there's a level of trust I guess I and other viewers would have to have in the lines. If we have that trust, I think it's just offside. But again, it's such an exact science that it's difficult to feel. That's why I feel sometimes if it's within a certain margin of tolerance, I'd be okay with it. But that's removing the characters, removing that incident in of itself. That's just generic preference that I have. So I think it's off according to the evidence that I have before me. But I didn't really see Erik ten Hag's comments in that.
You make a really good point in terms of the tolerance. I think that's something that's absolutely essential because at the end of the day, it is an individual who's freezing the frame. I presume, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I've got a feeling that somebody at VAR is freezing it upon the point of contact when the pass was made. Now, it's the width of a Rizzler paper. I mean, it was difficult to tell. I mean, those lines again. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how accurate those lines are, but it was just so difficult to call, and it's just there has to be some sort of understanding. Maybe, I mean, I to be honest, I'd introduce what you're saying. I think it's a bit like cricket where there is a umpire's call. So there is albeit it's a decision made by an official, but there has to be some sort of variable where it allows a little bit, and it should always go in favor of the attacker. I've always believed that football should always be, in a sense, it's an entertainment business. So therefore, if we're making a decision such as this, it has to favour maybe the attacker. So I think United were harshly dealt with. I agree. I think Gabriel, excellent piece of defending. He contorted his body in quite a strange way, but it worked. I mean, he just got, I mean, it almost like he'd been shot, but it worked. So again, I feel for Manchester United. I mean, as a Leeds supporter, it's not something that I do that often, but I do. I mean, I think they came with a strategy. Maybe it was stifle. Maybe it was a case of, right, we'll try and do them on the break. They played well. I mean, you briefly talked about Hojlund. I think he was outstanding. I mean, he was magnificent. He was there for what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but he just had everything in that short cameo. So I think if there is any silver lining for Manchester United fans, I think what they've done is I've certainly sort of looked at a player that I think will be exceptional. I mean, he almost reminded me of Haaland, but almost a more slicker Haaland, because he seemed to be a lot more sharper, a lot more pacier. His hold-up play as well. I mean, he's I think 20 or 21, but he was holding it up in a league which obviously has no experience of. But in that 10 minutes, I think he showed enough to prove why he was worth 70 or 80 million. So on the whole, decisions were I think they went in Arsenal's favour. We haven't talked about Havertz.
Oh, I'm coming on to it. I'll just let you wax lyrical about Manchester United's new number 9, and I agree with you. I think
rightly so.
Yeah, he looks the part. He's the kind of player who I think defenders over time will not want to play up against, because he seems to have. He's up for the fight. He's quick. He's pacey. I think let's see how he develops. It's an exciting story for Manchester United. And to your point, one of the silver linings perhaps from yesterday's game. Quickly, just before we move on to the Havertz goal, just very quickly, because we've run through this in good fashion. The Saka, there was some talk about Saka, whether he deserved a red card for a challenge that he initiated on Bruno Fernandes. We've both obviously watched the game, seen the incidents. Again, I don't see that as a red card for a very simple reason. One, if you look at it very closely, he's getting pulled by Dalot, and I think and Saka does get the free kick. But if you look at his right leg, it's taken out from underneath him by Dalot, so his leg collapses, and and it's from a standing position, so not with force, not with speed, not with any recklessness to some extent, where you're coming in with a certain level of speed and what have you. as his legs collapsing, his right leg's collapsing, he's then lunged for the ball. Fernandes has obviously nicked the ball out, and he's caught Fernandes around the ankle area and what have you. So for me, it was a yellow card, nothing more, nothing less. Again, if it's coming at speed, you can freeze frame anything and make it look bad. Again, he's had his leg taken out from him, which is why his leg collapses into the kind of horizontal position. So is it mistimed? Absolutely. But red for that, no chance, not for me.
No, I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one. There was a challenge, and I think it was never a red card, in my opinion. So with that one, I'm okay with that. I think that's a fair call.
That's a fair call. I'm going to let you go first on the Havertz one. I feel like you're itching to get your opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to make it absolutely brief.
And I do want you, but I do. Let's see. What's your complete thoughts on the incident? Because it's not just the incident, is it, Ayub? It's about how the decision was arrived to, and the potential consistency / inconsistency about that. So I'm going to give you the floor. Go on.
Right. I mean, in terms of officials, I expect officials to be incompetent, and they gave a penalty. And it wasn't a penalty. I mean, it is a contact sport. Now, obviously, you're always sort of saying about challenges, defenders should be challenging. Now, this was just a man who his sole intention was to try and win a penalty. And that's what he tried to do. To a certain extent, he succeeded. But thankfully, on this occasion, VAR corrected erroneous decision. So in my opinion, there was hardly any challenge. I mean, if a football player is going to go down with challenges such as that, then really he should not be playing football. He should be working in an office. He's far too soft. So that's it. Right decision was made. But again, it's the officials, because anybody who's played the game should have been able to look at that and think, nah, this man has dived. There's really no challenge that has facilitated him going down so easily. Thankfully, as I said, VAR, but it should never have got to VAR.
I want to get your thoughts on this, because this was a very interesting one for me. In the end, by the way, I disagree with you that he was trying to win a penalty. I actually disagree with you on that. Because if you look at the way he receives the ball from Nketiah, again, nice link up from Nketiah, he drives vertically because he's thinking, right, if I drive into the box, the percentages shift in my favor because defenders are going to be unwilling to put challenges in. And that's what you saw with Wan-Bissaka, who, again, was trying to withdraw himself, let's say. I don't think he was trying to win a penalty. And I'll tell you why I believe that to be the case. Because if Havertz, and listen, he's easy fodder at the moment, as they would say. You know, he's low hanging fruit, because at the moment, he absolutely is, because there's a lot of question marks about his suitability for Arsenal, for that style. He's come for big money. There was a lot of question marks for him at Chelsea as well, irrespective of him scoring the Champions League winning goal in the final. But that's his one magic moment, right? In England, you would argue, that Champions League final winning goal. There's something there, clearly. It can't be that all these managers are stupid buying him. But of course, he has to produce the performances. So he's easy fodder at the moment, because he had a missed opportunity in the first half that you'd expect him to do much, much better with, of course. But what I like is he's driven vertically with the ball. That I always like players who are trying to make things happen. So his first touch is a positive one. He's trying to get into the box because that tilts the percentages in his favor. Now, if I thought he was trying to win a penalty, what I would expect to see, and this is important, Ayub, is his left leg dangling towards Wan-Bissaka. It doesn't. His feet carry on in the same trajectory, in the same pattern, in the same path that you would expect anyone driving vertically. Watch very carefully. If he left his left leg hanging, you'd have me. If he left his right leg hanging, you'd have me. But he runs in the same path that anybody else would. If you remove Wan-Bissaka and Casemiro out of the equation, you'd just be running straight. He was running straight. What's happened, in my opinion, is that Wan-Bissaka and Casemiro have obviously taken that space away. The space is closed. Thereafter, there's this natural collision between Havertz's left foot. This is the key. And that's why when people say, or commentators and analysts were saying, Havertz has kicked him, that for me makes no sense. He was just naturally running, and Wan-Bissaka has come into his space, and Havertz's left foot has caught him on the calf or something, Wan-Bissaka's calf or shin or whatever it might be. Do I believe it was a penalty? Absolutely not. Because again, I have a high bar and I want to be very objective about that. I don't want to see penalties given willy-nilly. But the way in which that decision was reached, and again, I'm a big believer that in the end, I don't care about the on-field decision. Just get to the right call. And what I didn't like, and Howard Webb seems to be pulling the wool over people's eyes at the moment, is the way in which these decisions are reached. Because a week before, you had the Rashford incident against Nottingham Forest. And I always say there's no two incidents in football that are ever the same. But the point is, if you'll hear from a lot of Arsenal fans talk about, oh, it was a penalty, and once it's given, it should never be reversed, because Howard Webb, before the season, spoke about how we want to let the referee's decision be final. Something I disagree with, by the way. Just get to the right decision, Howard. I don't care how you get there. But yet the Marcus Rashford incident, which was the Nottingham Forest defender, Danilo, comes across, but he stops. Watch carefully again. It looks like he's going to put an incredibly clumsy challenge in, but he then stops. And then Rashford, and I don't want to say he initiated it, I don't think so. I think it's just a natural pathway collision. Football is a contact sport, but it's marginal at best. Havertz is contact, marginal at best, because there's some contact. I don't think anyone disagrees. There is contact, clearly, foot and calf. My point is, the decision that was given to us by Mike Dean, also on Gillette Soccer Saturdays, well, once it's given, VAR is not going to intervene. But yet yesterday, Mike Dean spoke about how, well, we don't want to be seeing soft penalties, so at least they arrived at the right decision. Dermot Gallagher today talking about on Ref Watch, ultimately the right decision was reached to. I'm like, no. You can't have it both ways. You can't on one hand argue, well, if the decision's given, it's got to be a high bar as a reference point. It has to then overcome whether it's a clear clanger to then where they'll send them to the screen. But then just say, well, at least we got to the right decision. No, you can't have it both ways. I'm a big believer, just get to the right decision. But you cannot tell me that Marcus Rashford's penalty against Nottingham Forest was a penalty. Again, high bar. I want to see proper fouls. And I would make the argument, Havertz was a more threatening situation. Rashford was going towards the byline. So I'm okay with it not being a penalty, but I disagree with those who say, A, he was trying to win one, and B, that ultimately he's kicked him. No, he's running in the natural pathway that he would ordinarily be running. If you can show me evidence to suggest he's hung his foot out like a lot of wingers do trying to initiate some contact, you've got me. But I don't understand how referees, especially Mike D now that he's on TV, Dermot Gallagher because he's on TV, and Howard Webb he's doing, where depending on how the decisions come to, they manipulate the reasoning given. Is it just, do we get to the right call? In which case, the referee's decision is immaterial to me. Or is it, which I hear all the time, well, once it's given, VAR is not going to intervene. I'm like, which one is it? It should be allowed to intervene. Let's just get to the right call. So you can't have it both ways. Right now, I don't want to be engaging hyperbole. I'll leave that to you, Ayub. But honestly, I cannot think of a time, and we'll get onto the Nathan Ake goal as well. I can't think of a time when you're so unsure about refereeing decisions. It feels like, what is going on? I don't understand it to some extent. So, yeah, I'm okay with it not being a penalty. I do think it was re-refereed, that incident, which is not in the rules, because they say you shouldn't be re-refereeing it, but that's just my opinion.
At least we agreed on the outcome. Maybe I suppose it's different ways that we've arrived at the conclusion. But I've been, for many years, I think, the standard of refereeing is just horrendous. I mean, it's something that we've talked about in previous shows, and no doubt we'll talk again. And that's the tragedy, because we have a premium product, but we have substandard officials officiating in one of the best products in the world, and it just is unacceptable. I think something has to be done. I think somewhere along the line, I think clubs, players, somebody needs to say, well, enough is enough. We need to really review how we go forward with officiating, because this is unacceptable, because every single game has some sort of incident. And again, what we're talking about, every single show now, there's always incidents we're talking about. And now, I mean, that leads on, I suppose, to Nathan Ake. Did it define the game? I think Manchester City probably would have won the game anyway, even if that goal was disallowed. But it was 1-1, and you never know. So again, what's your thoughts on that?
I think I've mentioned this decision a few times about the Brentford-Arsenal game last year. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, you can have a VAR official tie himself in knots about looking at so many phases of a free kick situation that he misses the most important phase, which is the cutback to Ivan Toney, which is clearly offside. It was in the first one. In the pass, I think it was Jensen. The header into Jensen was offside. The most critical aspect, you go back from the guy scoring and you think, right, is he offside from the pass before that? And Jensen was offside when he received the ball before he cut back. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this can happen. But I remember thinking, he spent so much time on the first few phases. I'm trying to think, human behavior. It's taking a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Everyone's stopped at the Emirates. It's a pressurized, and the mind works in mysterious ways, and you tie yourself in knots, and you don't quite follow the whole thing through properly. Even though it's incompetence, there's a level of empathy and understanding I have. Incompetence it may be, but I'm trying to understand the science behind it. The Ake one for me is an incredibly scary decision, because the way I see it is that referee on VAR has simply not implemented the rule. And if there's one thing you'd want the referee to be aware of, are the rules. I mean, the interpretation of it and what have you, this is not in question here at the moment. Clearly, the cross comes in, I think, from Foden, from the corner. I think it was Foden. And Nathan Ake's got a clear header. Now, Marco Silva should be pretty upset about that. Why Nathan Ake's got a clear header from just before half-time at the Etihad. But it's quite clear when he heads the ball that Akanji, who's in an offside position, it's not even close to offside, it's a good yard and a half offside, dummies the ball, kind of doing like what can only be described as a jumping jack, just kind of splits his legs, dummies the ball, and it nestles into the far corner. Now, clearly, Leno was also Akanji was in his line of sight, and he has to be interfering with him. Of course he has to be, because he's thinking, is he going to touch it? Is he not going to touch it? What's going to happen? And hence delays reaction and all the rest of it. Everyone I've spoken to, even Mike Dean, who, again, I do not want to quote too much, because he was the gentleman who said the Alexis McAllister red card was a clear red card 2 days before FA rescinded that red card. And he also
what an idiot.
And he also had multiple looks at it, which is why I question some of his smarts. But look, in the end, it's clearly offside. I don't really understand what the issue was. I mean, there's not even much debating this one. It's just clear offside. Haaland spoke about it after the game, saying, yeah, it's offside. Marco Silva clearly feeling obviously quite upset by it. Obviously, he was hard done by in the game before when one of his players was on the floor when Arsenal scored. But I don't understand what he's thinking. Even Dermot Gallagher today is like, it's just offside, because if the idea is the player has to be away from the ball and away from the sight of the keeper, which means that the keeper wasn't in any way impeded by his presence there. So basically, if he was offside on the other side of the pitch or the other side of the goal, most likely there's no controversy. The fact he's had to dive to get out of the way or jump, for the life of me, cannot understand why that referee, after multiple looks at a TV replay, has come to the conclusion that that's okay. He's had to jump to get out of the way. Leno has to be reacting to that. So for me, that's one of the more scarier decisions, I would say, this year, because now imagine you're a Fulham fan, and I know it was at 3:00, but you're a Fulham fan watching that, and you see the replay, and you're like, oh, thank God, we're all right. And then all of a sudden it's like, what? Hang on, the goal's been given. So incorrect application of the rules, it's unforgivable. At the highest level, it's unforgivable.
Absolutely right. I mean, I get very involved in sport, especially when it comes to Leeds. I get very emotional. Now, if I was a player and I'm on the receiving end of that, this is where maybe I suppose players sort of speak out of turn, maybe do something that they probably would regret afterwards. But it's the emotion, because how can you tolerate such incompetence? I mean, if I was a fan, I don't know, I'd almost be tempted to run on the pitch and kung fu kick the referee, because
calm down.
Yeah, it's just it is the biggest bugbear of mine. I just sort of think that you cannot allow officials to get away with this level of incompetence. You can't. I mean, it's multi-million pounds is at stake. I mean, you think about this, that clubs want to get to the Premier League. Why? Because it's such a lucrative cash cow. Fulham probably will be safe, so maybe in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to be a major issue. But imagine this is with a lower league or a lower position team. It could be the last minute. It's 1-1. It's the last minute, and this is what happens. It just cannot. I think now somebody needs to. Maybe some clubs need to get together and just say, well, look, this is something that we need to challenge, because it's unacceptable when an opposition striker is actually saying that it's a wrong decision. How wrong does it have to be? Normally, obviously, it's like we never get that. We're always, I didn't see that. This was obvious. This was blatantly obvious. So another poor decision. I'm sure when the international break's over, we'll be commenting on again. We'll be talking about bad decisions again.
Yeah, I mean, they're going through a tough time they are at the moment. And again, I've thought about things. I don't want to get too much into it because I think it's one for another episode about some of the things that what could happen and what should happen. There was some talk about potential, instead of Howard Webb doing all these kind of media rounds, he should be, maybe there's a referee, a senior ref that could join him and explain some of the other decisions, even on behalf of other referees. And when I mean explain, of course, nobody wants to hear, you don't need to tell me, I don't need to hear somebody come and tell me that that decision was wrong with Nathan Ake. But I think there's other stuff that they can do. I don't know whether it's, this is just thinking outside the box, a social media presence about kind of explaining the decision straight away afterwards. Even if the mistake is made, I'd want to hear about it afterwards to say, look, absolute clanger today, or big mistake made, this and that, blah, 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 whatever it might be. It's kind of the kind of, you don't hear much, it's there's so much frustration because you're thinking, well, who's accountable for this decision? Who was it? Is there an apology? I'm not saying that an apology is going to fix things. You should just get it right. Again, for the life of me, I can't understand why they can't just watch it and say, yes, he's interfering, he's in the line of sight, done. It's not even, you need one replay. It's not many replays. So how has that decision come to? I don't understand. And I think that frustrates managers, and then they get booked for it and what have you, which is really kind of disappointing. But yeah, it's one for another day. But this weekend, there were a few that I was scratching my head, to be honest.
I mean, just the last word on this. I mean, Marco Silva, in his post-match interview, he eloquently put it. It was, and it's something that I think we've talked about before, that you've got non-football people who are officiating VAR. And it can't. It's not an admin job. And same with, I mean, I've always sort of said about referees as well, that it should be ex-pros. And I think it's about time that we introduced ex-professionals into VAR. And if we can, try and get ex-pros to be referees. I think that will at least begin to address the level of incompetency that exists right at this moment in time, because at the moment it's absolutely farcical. It's a joke. It's a disgrace. And there seems to be nobody accountable. I don't know who's accountable.
Yeah, and I think the lack of transparency, and this is what we spoke about, where the fans are not involved in the communication process between the referee and VAR, and how VAR is not communicating the decision to the team just the way they do in some of the American sports. Because of that lack of transparency, there's even more frustration on the side of coaches, on the side of viewers. And that's why I'm a big believer in keeping viewers engaged, and it has to be an interactive process. Still, you need people to do their jobs, unfortunately. And if you can't do the jobs at the highest level, for the Premier League, to have a decision like that, I mean, I could not understand it. I just could not understand it. He's had to dummy the ball to let it in. So how that cannot be interfering with the goalkeeper, where it's all about instincts, reacting fast, being able to even react to deflections and all the rest of it. How that cannot have impacted Leno is beyond me. Clearly did. How the referee or the VAR has come to that decision, that's a question.
I agree. I still can't understand it, and I don't think I will understand it. But let's move on. We had a packed weekend of games. Any results that stood out? I mean, the result that stood out for me was Chelsea at Forest. Actually, a 1-0 win for Forest at Stamford Bridge. Any thoughts on that? I mean, they've got stars coming out of every position, but at the moment, it's not quite working.
Yeah, and I think in the end, we have to define working, isn't it, Ayub? But did I ever think that Chelsea were going to have a very serene, calm, kind of consistent season? Absolutely not. And I think I spoke about this last time. I worry about how in sometimes difficult situations in year one, and I call this year one, irrespective of who's in year 2 or year 3 of that project, but it's year one of this kind of new look Chelsea. And the worry I always had was, in difficult situations, how do you get a group of new players who have not been there together, going through difficult times, to come through and get a point when a point looks difficult, to get 3 points from it's like Arsenal yesterday. There's a reason why it seems Arsenal continue to sometimes get these late goals. It's because they've been through it a few times now, or a lot of times, often putting themselves in a hole to be dug out of. Not a good, steady diet to be on, of course. But there's a reason. There's an inherent kind of camaraderie and team spirit and a mentality that builds over time by togetherness, by playing together, by that chemistry. And that was the concern I had for Chelsea, the fact that they would find themselves in situations where they needed some magical moments, when you need to dig deep. And that's been a concern. They've obviously had a draw and 2 defeats, as well as obviously the home win against Luton, which is a banker in your book. But yeah, the two.
That's still going strongly. Is that what three defeats on the spin now for Luton?
Correct.
0 points.
Nil point, indeed. And I think in the end, so I mean that's a draw at home to Liverpool, defeats away to West Ham, home to Forest. Teams that you would feel like Chelsea would not want to be dropping points up against, of course, especially home to Forest. So yeah, Caicedo, he's obviously lost the ball in the middle of the park. He's had 2 difficult moments in Chelsea kit so far. I still think he's a top player. There's no issues. But he gave the penalty against Emerson, if you remember, against West Ham. That was a tough one. He's just come on. Obviously not been fully engaged in pre-season with Brighton with all the kind of uncertainty over his future. And then he had a great game against Luton for the most part, and then obviously lost the ball. Difficult situation. A striker who's at the peak of his powers right now, Awani, just plays a lovely ball through Silva's legs. He looks the real deal, does Awani. I really like him. He's had a good start to the season, good end to last season as well. And then Elanga finishes it off. I just think Chelsea have to be patient. These are going to be, you're going to have to take your lumps, Chelsea are this season. There are going to be some difficult moments. I don't think there's any situation that they will move on from Mauricio Pochettino at any point this season. I have that much faith in Chelsea Football Club. I hope, fingers crossed, because I will be beyond upset if anything different happens. But no, I just think this is part and parcel of throwing a whole bunch of new players together. When those difficult times come, it sometimes it's not always gel. I mean, they missed some great opportunities. Nicholas Jackson, how do you miss that from 4 yards out? He's stretching for it. I don't think he has to stretch for it. He could just keep running and smack it in. A lot of people had Raheem Sterling and Nicholas Jackson in their fantasy football team, so that was an assist and goal going missing. But yeah, in the end, Forest probably earned themselves a good win there, to be fair. And they fought against United, they fought against Arsenal, so big win for them. But Chelsea, question marks. But I don't think there's any time to panic, Joop.
Well, I'm not panicking. My lad may be panicking, but it's I don't know what the objective is for Chelsea this season. I mean, what is it? Is it finishing top 6, top 10?
But what was it that you said after their draw against Liverpool?
I was really impressed. Really impressed.
I think the line that you used when I put the question to you was, Chelsea are back. I think was the
I know. I mean, I'm sort of on the spur of the moment, but I look at it now and it just seems like a ridiculous assumption, because I think at the moment it looks a little bit disjointed. I think they've still got spells of play that they play well, because you can't have that many good players and they're not going to play well. But it's just, I've always had this thought about having too many. Because at the moment, I mean, I'm not sure what their squad is like, but it's like he looked quite a full-on figure, Lavia, and he obviously wasn't even on the bench. So I don't know what his thoughts are, whether he still thinks it's a good move. Caicedo at the moment, you're right, he's a quality player. I mean, he's going to come good, but it just looks a little bit disjointed at this moment in time. But I think you're right. I mean, they've got a great coach, they've got a great squad. At some stage it has to click, but I'm not sure what their objectives are this year. Right, talking about teams clicking, I think Liverpool seems to be clicking quite well now. A decent result against a decent Aston Villa side. I call them to be the winners of the league, and I'm getting more and more confident. I think they will win the league. Why are you laughing like that for? I'm being serious here. I mean, how dare you?
Well, we both reserve the right to change our minds. And I think after the international break, we probably should just give ourselves the opportunity if we want to change that. Because, the windows come to an end, at least for incomings. There may still be some outgoings. And that's why it's interesting that you mentioned Liverpool. Going into the game, there was a lot of talk about Mo Salah being targeted by the Saudi Pro League, £150 million bid supposedly rejected. What was really interesting about the game, or the comments after the game, Klopp speaking very strongly about how there seems to be a lot of external noise, but there's no internal noise whatsoever with Mo Salah. Dominic Szoboszlai, scorer of the first goal, spoke about how he's been speaking to Mo and he's 100% committed. I don't see what the issue is. I mean, look, these all, I mean, Liverpool were a little bit stronger in their comments than I expected, let's say, because there's still some talk, if rumours are to be believed, that the Saudis are jetting into London to finalise a £200 million bid. I mean, that's some serious dosh, as they say. So let's see if that tests Liverpool. But from all accounts, it would seem Liverpool see this as an absolute non-story. So let's see. But that was the big story, wasn't it, going into the game? And Liverpool, big win for them. Incredible first goal by Szoboszlai. We spoke when they signed him. If you remember, I spoke about how he will score a few long-range goals. His shooting's incredible, but left foot technique, superb, unbelievable. Trent Alexander-Arnold playing in this kind of unique position on the ball, kind of where he was ending up as centre-back with Matip drifting wide, and he was just kind of a quarterback picking out players, Salah, Diaz, Nunes, all of them kind of running vertically, and he was picking them out superb. Villa couldn't really get close to him. So yeah, incredible performance by Liverpool for the most part. That game was done and dusted. Matip missed a sitter from a wonderful set piece by Trent Alexander-Arnold. There is some talk about a hamstring injury for him. Don't know whether that's just good timing with the international break, but let's see how
I think it is. I think it is, considering Van Dijk is what, 3 games, 4 games?
I've not heard news about any extension to the 1-game ban, because it's only a 1-game ban for Van Dijk.
Oh, okay. I thought I was under the impression that because of his verbals. That
I've not heard anything. Outcome of that, because he was charged. You are right. He was charged with just not leaving the field quickly and abusing an official. But a great performance. I mean, Aston Villa are a good team. I know they got pummeled by Newcastle away from home, so their away form will probably worry them, bar that big win at Burnley. But yeah, big win for Liverpool. And I think if they can keep Salah, that's the key, isn't it, Ayub? If they can keep Salah, and Nunes is firing, should have had himself another goal or two, to be honest with you. Very unlucky with the one that hit the post for the cash on goal. But yeah, absolutely. Liverpool look good. And maybe a bit early to say they'll win the title, but they look good.
I'm saying it. I'm calling it right now. I think they're just making the right noises. I mean, Salah is the key. I mean, you don't want to lose Salah, but I think Liverpool are calling all the shots. If they want to sell Salah, they will sell him. But if they don't, they'll keep him, irrespective of what bid the Saudis put in.
There was one more game, if I could just quickly mention. I just want to get your thoughts on Brighton Newcastle. Brighton winning 3-1, Ayub. 3 hat-tricks this weekend. Evan Ferguson scoring a hat-trick for Brighton. Obviously, Heung-min Son for Spurs at Burnley, and Erling Haaland, but that's just normal.
A normal day in the office.
normal.
And he was my captain. Normal. I don't know, 40-odd points.
40
but then again,
points.
I think he was everybody's captain.
Well, I don't have Erling Haaland in my team for reasons we will come on to later on in the next podcast. But although I'll have a difficult time explaining that one. But no, there was a bit of talk, wasn't there? I mean, Evan Ferguson, there's some talk about him next season. Brighton, obviously having lost last week at home to West Ham, Newcastle losing in heartbreaking fashion, really, against Liverpool. And there was, a big game kind of for both of them, early doors. And Newcastle missed a few opportunities early on. Your man, Alexander Isak, probably should have done better hitting the target with one of those earlier chances. But Evan Ferguson, hat-trick, highly thought of. Definitely thought of definitely kind of on the cards that he may move on next summer for a big money move to one of the bigger teams. But he showed a little bit about what he was about. That second goal, and Newcastle will be disappointed. They've had to reshuffle the pack at the back with Botman's injury, and that's something Eddie Howe will be looking at. You saw clearly how neither centre-back was engaging with Ferguson for that second goal, but how well did he place that into the bottom corner? A few question marks at the back with Pope as well with the first goal. So he's had a few mistakes creep into his game. And you know what it's like for a goalkeeper, a few mistakes, lack of confidence. They kind of tend to becomes a bit of a snowball effect. So Newcastle, that's 3 defeats on the bounce after narrow defeat at the Etihad. Tough, brutal defeat at home to Liverpool against 10 men. And then pretty much being beaten convincingly. Nice goal by Callum Wilson aside, but beaten convincingly by Brighton. We spoke early on this summer, I think it's very early to be talking about this, but we spoke in the summer how perhaps this was a season where there'll be a little bit of pressure that'll just come on to Eddie Howe. They've been given a tough Champions League group. We'll see how they fare. I think they've got a good chance to get through. But it'll be very interesting to see how this season kind of just progresses from this moment on. They've got the squad, the talent, the quality to still compete at the top. I believe so. But he's got a job on his hands now to lift a group now that's had some tough defeats. So it'll be very interesting to see how the story of Newcastle unfolds this season.
Agree. I would sort of say there's a little bit of heat, but I think you've got to factor in that it's been a tough start for Newcastle in terms of the opposition. So maybe after the international breaks, when they start playing the lesser sides, they may start picking up the points and the confidence will come back. But the expectations after last season are certainly high. So even against the better teams, I don't think it's just, oh, well, they're better teams, so therefore it's fine. I think the expectation not of only the crowd, but the board as well. They'll be saying, well, look, you finished it in the Champions League position. We obviously want to improve. So a little bit of pressure, but far too early to call an Eddie Howe is a quality manager, quality coach. And I'm sure he'll maybe utilize this international break and just get a few bits and pieces in his mind. So next time when they start playing again, that he'll have an answer to some of the questions that are being posed at this moment.
Yeah.
Just one more game I want to quickly touch upon, and it's for a reason. It's Spurs. I mean, they just seem to be, my word, they are oozing class right at this moment in time. They are second at this moment in time, 10 points. I think Spurs fans are getting very, very excited. I think they've got every reason to believe that maybe this is their year. You were very glowing of the manager, the coach. I was perhaps a little bit more skeptical. What are your thoughts about Spurs and the way they've started and the way that the new coach has implemented his ideas?
Well, we'll be discussing Spurs in more detail, won't we? You'll be in the next episode. I'll let you kind of introduce or give us a little bit of a preview of that. But I'm a big fan of the coach. I'll be honest, I think he's my favorite coach in the league. I swear, just because I like how he conducts himself. I've said this a million times. I like that about managers. You are the figurehead of the club as often that you are. And I think the way you carry yourself matters with the fans, with the media. He speaks well. I mean, yes, let's wait for a bad decision to go against him and see how he reacts. But I think he'll be even keeled and what have you. What helps for Spurs this season is that the expectation has been tempered, hasn't it, Ayub? And it's a bit like Arsenal last season. If you think about it, to some extent, there is some role reversal. If you think about Spurs heading into last season, there was some talk about them being dark horses, kind of maybe fighting City and Liverpool. If you remember heading into the season, there was some talk that they could close the gap further or the rest of it and what have you. And that did not materialize. On Arsenal were thought of, well, they finished fifth, they got beaten out for the Champions League spot, or we'll see. And they were the ones who then mounted a title challenge. And I've long stated the fact that ultimately success is not linear. It's not a case of let's just get into this as top four, then we challenge and then we win. In the end, you can go and make a big jump from fifth to fighting for challenges like Arsenal, fighting for the title like Arsenal did last season, the season before Liverpool did, if you remember, because the year before they finished fifth. Now, under different circumstances, because they had a lot of injuries the season prior, but they finished they just got into fourth, if you remember the famous Alisson goal. They then went on to just get pipped by City the following season and lose in the Champions League final, going for the quadruple. So my point is, it can be done. You can make those jumps. It's about getting 2 or 3 critical points right, which is, do you have the right guy at the helm? I'm a believer that they do. Do you have a style of football that is conducive to winning football games, i.e. relatively solid at the back, also creating good opportunities? Spurs clearly are ticking the boxes at the moment. And is there a feel-good factor? Is there an engagement with the fans? Because that will also get you some points along the way, because they'll also believe the next time they go 1-0 down, they'll think, this is a team we should get behind. They've got the opportunity to score goals. So we'll go into this in more detail next week, but absolutely flying high, big hat-trick from Heung-min Son, some great goals, some lovely finishes, some passing. Burnley, few question marks, I would say. I think our friend George would probably be a little bit concerned with the level of defending, because some of that was too open, way too open at this level, being pulled apart by a good team, though. And clearly they're playing for one another. Patterns of play, really good, flooding men forward. It's exciting. And I think fans, if you're going to ask them if they win, lose, I'd like our team to be exciting to watch. And they've not been in previous years under different managers. I think this could be the first time. And I think Ange Ball might well just become a noun coined in the Collins Dictionary. Who knows?
And you alluded to the point that this Friday, we will be recording this Friday. And we did it previously with George, our Burnley supporting friend. So this Friday, and it's perfect because Spurs have had a fantastic start to the season. We're welcoming a guest. He's Mohamed Mogra, affectionately known as Moggy, hardcore Spurs fan. He's had many dark times supporting Spurs, but I think the man is buzzing now. So we'll have him on the show. He's going to be full of beans, so that should be something slightly different. So that's going to be on Friday. We might maybe talk a little bit about the Fantasy Premier League. It's quite unusual because the three of us, me, you, and Bash, I'm about 75th, I think, at this moment in time. You're about 60th or 54th or something like that. So the three just onsiders, not doing so well in our own league. So maybe we might talk about that. But it's going to be a little bit about Spurs, and rightly so. They've had a fantastic start to the season. So it would be nice to hear a Spurs fan talk about Spurs. So
I was just wondering. I wonder if he'll come on now because when George came on, they've not won a game since. So Moggy, the curse of the Just Onside podcast.
Oh, right. So that's a wrap. Thank you so much, as always, for watching the show. As always, please subscribe if you haven't. Smash a like, it really does help the algorithms. Share with your friends. Hit the notification bell because it will tell you when the next video is dropping. It's been a Monday when we're recording. It's been a fantastic sunny day. I hope you've really enjoyed your day as well. Hopefully this video will be coming out shortly. So until the next time, don't stray off.